to begin the story gently, preparing the listener for a slow journey into time. Close your eyes, let the world grow quiet. Above you, the sky softens into a deep desert blue, and far away, the Nile breathes in its ancient rhythm. The wind is warm, dry, and full of memory. Somewhere in the distance, a hawk circles above fallen stone. Time doesn't rush here, it drifts, like sand through fingers, like a name spoken slowly into silence. Tonight, you step into a land that never truly died, only slept. Beneath golden dunes and sun-bleached temples, Egypt dreams. It dreams in stone and shadow, in hymns and hieroglyphs, in pyramids that reach for stars long extinguished. You won't hurry through history tonight. You will drift gently through it, following the breath of kings and queens, scribes and farmers, gods and ghosts. Let the hush of ages carry you. Let Egypt open, one layer at a time, like a scroll unraveling in candlelight. This is not a history lesson. This is a remembering. Welcome to the sleep of the Pharaohs. You begin in silence. Before kings, before gods, before even the names of places, there is only the hush of wind over sand. The world here does not announce itself. It unfolds, slowly, patiently, like the tide returning to a stone it has smoothed for centuries. You are standing where time is not yet divided. There is no year, no century, no dynasty, only the desert and the river that dares to split it. This is not yet Egypt, not as the world will come to know it, but it is a land already listening to the rhythm of the Nile as it rises and retreats, to the sky which offers no rain but gives direction in stars, to the earth cracked and quiet until the flood brings its soft green breath. You walk beside early people who have no hieroglyphs to record their stories, but they shape the land with instinct and tenderness. They fish with woven nets. They carve bone into tools. They bury their dead facing west, toward the place where the sun goes to sleep. Even then, even now, they sense that light disappears only to return again. Life is a circle, not a line. They do not call themselves Egyptians. They do not call themselves anything at all. They are simply those who have stayed, who have let the Nile decide the seasons. And in their stillness, something grows, not cities, not yet, but a relationship with the rhythm of the world. In this early hush, you notice how nothing is rushed. The flood comes once a year, like a long inhale. When the river swells in July, it spills across the valley like ink across parchment. Silt settles. Seeds are tucked into the mud by careful fingers. Wheat and barley wake. The people wait, not passively, but in harmony. The flood is not feared. It is anticipated, celebrated. It is a God that feeds, not punishes. The earliest homes are made from reeds and river mud, small, curved enclosures that rise beside the banks, vanishing with each season's change. People gather fish, herd cattle, shape pots with patient hands. They do not build for forever, not yet. They build for the now, for the next meal, for the warmth of family and fire. And yet, even in these small acts, you see the seeds of something immense. The idea that human hands can shape the world into order. From the south, in lands that will one day be called Nubia, travelers arrive. They bring obsidian, stories, sometimes conflict. From the Mediterranean to the north, breezes carry rumors of rain, coolness, forests the people here will never know, but still they stay. Not out of isolation, but of recognition. There is power in this valley. a narrow ribbon of life drawn through the wide palm of death. You stand beside a woman shaping bread in the sand. She hums to herself as she grinds grain between stones. She does not know what a pharaoh is. She has never seen a pyramid, but she knows how to listen to her child's breathing as he sleeps in the shade, to the wind's shift as the flood draws near, to the silence that precedes change. In her body, in her bones, the foundation of a civilization is already forming, and then slowly tools change. A new smoothness in the pottery, a sharper edge to the blades. People begin to gather in larger numbers. Villages rise from the earth like scattered seeds taking root. They cluster near the river's bend, where fish are plentiful, where land is rich, where trade can happen. A word is spoken, Nakada, a name that will one day name a culture. You are walking now through a world where memory starts to coalesce. The dead are buried with care, with beads, with food, with tools. This is not mere disposal. This is belief. The belief that life continues, that the dead still feel hunger, cold, longing. And if the dead feel, then the living must tend to them. A theology is blooming, not in temples, but in gesture. You come to a wall scratched with early marks. They are not yet writing, not truly, but symbols. A bird, a ripple of water, a shape like a leg in motion. These marks do not tell stories, not yet, but they gesture toward the idea of story, toward continuity, toward preservation. The people begin to look beyond their villages. They trade with distant places, from Afghanistan, cedar from Lebanon, gold from Nubia, not as empire, but as exchange. The idea of wealth is born, and with it, the idea of difference. Some are born into homes of more, some of less. The seed of hierarchy begins to root. Still, the Nile holds it all together. You watch it pass slowly, its current indifferent to quarrels and wealth. It brings both flood and famine. It gives and withdraws. It is not a god of vengeance, but of balance. The people begin to worship not the river itself, but the forces within it. Fertility, strength, patience. The river becomes voice. The voice becomes myth. And myth becomes the blueprint for King's Dot. Somewhere, dash perhaps in Hierakonpolis, or Abydos a figure rises above the rest. A leader, not yet called Pharaoh, but someone whose will shapes others. They wear the bones of Power, crown of reeds, a staff of shepherds. Their grave is deeper, their body wrapped with more, and around them a murmur begins. The murmur of divine order. You see then how civilization does not begin with war or monuments. It begins with agreements, with people, choosing to stay near one another, to specialize, to share, to build grain silos instead of hunting, to create rituals, to pass on not just tools, but meaning. You lie down on the bank of the Nile, under stars untouched by smoke or city light. The night air is warm and the insects sing. You imagine a young child staring at the same sky thousands of years before. The pyramids. She names the stars after stories her mother told. She wonders what lies beyond the curve of the river. She closes her eyes, dreaming of lions made of starlight and gods with wings. Even now, you feel her breath in the wind. The past is not far. It is here sleeping beneath your feet, curled beneath layers of dust, memory, and stone. It is the hum behind silence. You do not yet know the names of Djoser, of Sneferu, of Khufu. You have not yet entered the tombs, or spoken the prayers of the dead, but you are here, at the doorway. You have seen the soil of memory and placed your foot upon it. The story will grow from this place. From this rhythm, this patience, Egypt will rise and fall and rise again. It will speak in stone. It will shape time. But it begins not with crowns or conquest. It begins in the sand, in breath, in waiting, in the choice to remain beside a river that remembers, and in the stillness just before history begins. You hear a whisper, not from the past, but from inside yourself. Stay, listen. It begins here. You sit by the water's edge as dawn across the Nile like silk soft and gold, warming the mist that clings to the reeds. The river hums, not loudly, but with the steady breath of something ancient and aware. It no longer just flows, it speaks. Not in language as you know it, but in rhythm, in pattern, in cycles that etch themselves into the minds and bones of those who live along its banks. The Nile, in its constancy and change, becomes a teacher, a ruler, a god, and the people begin to answer. Civilization begins not with bricks or blades, but with listening. When the floodwaters return each year, they do so with gifts, silt, moisture, the soft promise of life. And with that promise, people begin to organize. You see it. Now, granaries rising like beehives of clay, storehouses tucked into earth like wombs. This is not merely survival, it is planning. It is language made visible in structure. The Nile is no longer just a river. It is a sentence, and each field, each wall, each irrigation canal is a phrase echoing back. Villages stretch along the river in patterns that mimic its own winding shape. What was once isolated and scattered now begins to connect. You walk through these villages, places like Nakane and Butoand. You notice how the same marks appear again and again on pottery and walls. The marks are more than decoration. They are memory made visible. A fish, a bird, a ripple, a hand, symbols, repeating like heartbeat and breath. These are the ancestors of writing. The first glyphs rise not from royalty, but from need, from the need to name, to count, to remember. Hieroglyphs are born from observation. You trace one in your mind now, the zigzag for water, the loop for rope, the spiral for sun. They are not abstractions, but mirrors. The world is written exactly as it is seen, then layered with meaning. The eye is no longer just an eye, it is protection. The ankh is no longer just a looped cross, it is life. Each symbol holds not only its shape, but its shadow. And still, the Nile teaches. It gives, but also takes. One year, the flood is too high, swallowing the crops. The next, it is too low, and famine creeps in like a shadow at dusk. People begin to chart the stars, to study the moon, to count the days between the river's moods. Out of these quiet calculations, something extraordinary begins to form. Order. You walk among the early scribes, now barefoot, seated beneath shaded awnings, their reed pens dipped in ink the color of dusk. They write not poems, not yet, but inventories, baskets of grain, numbers of cattle, the weight of barley. These scribes are the first civil servants, the keepers of balance. Their records become the spine of civilization. What is planted, what is harvested, what is owed. And slowly, their writing begins to curve beyond numbers, into names, into narrative. To write is to hold time still. It is to preserve a thought beyond the breath that carries it. It is to ensure that one's presence outlives the body. You see how this changes everything. A ruler is no longer just a man, but a lineage. A temple is no longer just a building, but a memory made permanent. Language becomes architecture. Architecture becomes legacy. It is around this moment that kings rise not from myth, but from structure. The land is still divided. Upper Egypt in the south, narrow and mountainous, and Lower Egypt in the north, broad and fanned like the petals of a lotus. For centuries, these two lands exist like twin rivers, sometimes flowing in harmony, sometimes colliding in flood. Then comes a figure whose name will be wrapped in mist, Nama or perhaps Menes. He may be one or many, but whoever he is, he carries a crown that binds red and white, lotus and papyrus, south and north. And with this union, the Nile becomes a spine, and Egypt a body. The first dynasty is born, and with it, history proper begins. You are present for the moment it happens, not in battle, but in transition. The first royal name carved into a stone. Pallet, the falcon god Horus perched atop it. You watch as art begins to reflect power. No longer just images of daily life, but of divinity, procession, triumph. The king becomes not only a man, but an idea, a bridge between earth and sky, between body and eternity. With unity comes complexity, taxation, justice, architecture, religion deepens. The gods become a language of their own. Ra, the sun; Osiris, the green god of the underworld; Thoth, with the head of an ibis, writing down the weight of your soul. The gods do not compete. They echo different truths, different needs. Egypt does not fear contradiction. It flows with it just, like the river Dot. You sit with a child in the village, tracing animals in the sand. She tells you that her father speaks to crocodiles, that her mother sings to the moon, that each person carries a Ka spirit that must be fed. She does not speak in metaphor, she speaks in faith. In a world where every action touches eternity, temples begin to rise, not yet vast, but orderly, columns carved with early symbols, altars holding offerings of beer and bread. Each priest a keeper of ritual, each gesture a repetition of cosmic order. Nothing is wasted, nothing is rushed. The very stones are arranged according to harmony, north to south, east to west, the alignment of sky and sun etched into every Waldot in the capital now, at Memphisu. Walk through courtyards of government. You see how administration has become sacred. Laws are not arbitrary, they are reflections of Mat, balance, truth, justice. The king is not a tyrant, but a fulcrum. When he governs with fairness, the flood comes. When he fails, the fields dry. Politics and nature are braided together in a story that feels less like control and more like participation in a sacred design. Writing grows more elegant. From the chisel to the brush, from stone to papyrus, you unroll a scroll and see prayers, written in curves and wings. Language no longer just records, it sings. And in its singing, it prepares the way for poets, for philosophers, for the thousand soft voices that will one day fill tombs and temples with echoes of longing, of wisdom, of devotion. And yet even now what stuns you most is the slowness, the patience with which it all unfolds. There is no rush to empire, no conquest for conquest's sake. Egypt rises not in a sprint, but in a rhythm. It breathes with the Nile. It writes with the sun. It builds with the stones handed down by wind and flood. You close your eyes, and as you do, you feel the land humming beneath your feet, not loudly, but with certainty. You feel the river still speaking, its words inscribed in silt and silence. You feel the first library stirring, the first archives, the first memory that is not just held in a body, but in a symbol. The Nile has learned to speak, and because of that, Egypt will never again be silent. You wake before the sun, wrapped in the hush that lives only between stars and morning. Around you, the desert is not barren, it is breathing. It stretches in every direction like the body of something, sleeping, ancient, and still dreaming. You walk toward the horizon, where stone triangles rise from the earth, not like buildings, but like thoughts made solid. There is no mistaking them. The pyramids do not hide. They wait. At first glance, they seem impossibly still immovable, eternal. But as the sun breaks the edge of the sky, the light touches their flanks, and you see it. A shimmer, a sigh, the slow awakening of something deeper than stone. The Great Pyramid of Giza stands before you, not as a monument, but as a frozen breath, a held exhale meant to last forever. It does not rush, it endures. You walk closer, and each step becomes a question. How did they lift these stones, each one heavier than 10 men? How did they align them so precisely, as if the stars themselves whispered the blueprint? There are theories, ramps, pulleys, countless hands, but standing here, those explanations feel like shadows of a deeper truth. The pyramid was not only built with muscle, it was built with belief. You imagine the workers not slaves, but laborers, craftsmen, stonecutters, bakers, architects, visionaries, thousands of them, fed by granaries, sheltered in sun-baked villages, singing songs in rhythm with their work. They haul limestone and granite under the heat, guided not by fear, but by something close to reverence. To build the house of a god-king is to earn eternity. Each stone laid as a syllable in a sentence that will never be erased. And at the center of this vision stands Pharaoh Khufu, or Cheops, as he will be called later. His name survives only faintly in carved graffiti hidden within chambers deep inside the pyramid's throat. He is silent here, his voice drowned by the sighs of what he left behind. And yet, you can feel his presence not as a man, but as intention, a desire to be remembered not with noise, but with silence shaped into geometry. Step inside now. Feel the temperature drop, the light dissolve. The air is still, dense with time. The corridors narrow, leading upward through stone too old to speak. The weight of it presses not just above you, but within you. This is not a building, it is a journey, a ritual through architecture, meant to carry a soul upward. Like the body of Osiris reborn, the burial chamber is small compared to the mountain that contains it. The walls are bare, no inscriptions, no gold, just a granite box where a god-king once lay, wrapped in linen and mystery. But do not be fooled by the absence of decoration. The pyramid itself is the offering. The tomb is not where the magic happens. It is the whole structure, the alignment to the stars, the perfect angles, the precision of direction that speaks to something larger, a civilization's dialogue with the divine outside. The sun has risen fully. The shadows shift. You notice the smaller pyramids, the queens, the noblemen's clustered like moons around a planet. The Sphinx crouches nearby, its lion body and human face eroded by centuries of sand and wind. Its eyes are chipped, but it still gazes east toward the sunrise. It has watched over the plateau for more than 4,000 years, and still it guards its riddles. This is the Old Kingdom, Egypt's first golden age, a time when kings were gods walking the earth. When the principle of balance and truth was carved not only into law, but into stone. Every brick, every beam of sunlight measured and aligned. the pyramids at Giza and those before them at Saqqara and Medem are not built merely to house the dead. They are built to reflect order, to echo the heavens. You drift south in thought, to Saqqara, where the step pyramid of Djoser still rises like a staircase to the sky. There, the architect Imhotep left behind one of history's first monuments in stone, a man so brilliant. He was later worshipped as a god of wisdom. His creation was not just a tomb. It was the beginning of an idea that stone can remember. From Djoser to Khufu to Kafir and Menkaure, each pyramid refines the vision. Angles become smoother, lines more precise, interiors more aligned with the stars. The scale is staggering, but so is the silence. These structures do not boast. They simply exist, immense and unbending, whispering across the millennia. We were here. We saw eternity. We built toward it. You sit in the sand, letting your body rest against the base of the Great Pyramid. You close your eyes and imagine the desert as it once was, a construction site alive with dust and chants, oxen and copper chisels, drawings marked with red ink by master planners. You hear drums, you hear laughter, you hear the slow lifting of something sacred. And now that labor is over. The stones remain. The voices have long gone silent, but their arrangement speaks. You understand now. The pyramids are not about death. They are about transcendence. They are resurrection, stability, hope. They are the idea that the human spirit can be measured in cubits and degrees, and still touch the stars. There are other pyramids, 2 scores of them. Some collapsed, some crooked, some buried in sand and time, each one a letter in a language that spells out Egypt's longing to outlast forgetting, and they nearly succeed. When the Greeks arrive centuries later, they will marvel at what they find. They will not know how the pyramids were built. They will guess, and they will name them wonders. And so they are. But you are resting here. In the desert sun, know something else. You know they are not wonders because they are big. They are wonders because they are still. Because they endure in a world that forgets. Because they do not move. And yet they carry entire civilizations on their backs. The wind picks up now, brushing sand against stone, as if nature itself is reading the lines. You feel the weight of time, not as a burden, but as a presence. These pyramids are not past. They are still speaking. Their prayers are not over. The Pharaoh inside does not answer. He does not need to. He is still asleep and dreaming in stone. You descend now, not through stairways or corridors of stone, but through time's slow shadow down into the hush where the living meet their mirrors. Death, in ancient Egypt, is not a rupture, but a transition. It is not a door slammed shut, but a long passage carved in stars and silence. And at the heart of that passage waits a god, Osiris, green-skinned and wrapped in linen, with eyes that do not blink. He was once king of the living, they say, once whole, a brother, a ruler, a father, until jealousy tore him into pieces. His body was scattered, flung across the land like seed. But Isis, his wife and sister, gathered him again. Limb by limb, word by word, she wrapped him in tenderness and grief, and through her mourning he rose again, not as king of the Nile, but as lord of the hidden realm, ruler of all that sleeps beneath the sand. This is the myth that shaped it. Civilization's understanding of death not as erasure, but as remaking. In the story of Osiris, the Egyptians saw a pattern, that what is broken can be reassembled, that death is not final, that memory can knit the soul back together. You walk Now beside a funeral procession along the Nile, a boat glides across the calm water, painted with images of protective gods. At its center lies the body of a man, still and bound, his face hidden beneath a painted mask. But he is not alone. His car, his life force, lingers near. His bar, his spirit that flies, hovers in wait. For the Egyptians believed the self was not singular, but a constellation, and all its parts had to be guided, fed, and named. Even in death, you follow them to the western land where the sun sets, where the necropolises bloom along the desert's edge like stone flowers. Saqqara, Abydos, later Thebes cities for the dead, where the tombs are homes built for forever. Death is not departure. It is a journey, and the tomb is not an ending but a beginning place. Inside, the walls shimmer with color, blues and golds, reds like dried pomegranate, ochres like warm sand. The scenes play out not like static images, but like instructions, the weighing of the heart, the offerings to the gods, the greetings to the gatekeepers of the underworld. The book of the dead lies open in pigment and ink, not a book as we know it, but a series of spells, invocations, maps, a guidebook for the spirit to find its way. The most sacred moment comes in the hall of two truths. You step inside in silence. Here, the soul of the deceased stands before Osiris and 42 divine judges. Anubis, jackal-headed, weighs the heart against the feather of Mat. If the heart is light and tainted by cruelty or greeted, will pass. If heavy, it will be devoured by Amit, the devourer of souls, a beast made of lion, hippo, and crocodile. There is no hellfire here, no punishment, only balance. Only the question, were you just? And if the heart is pure, the soul moves forward into the field of reeds, the mirror world of earth, where wheat grows tall and families reunite, where boats glide through waters calm as breath. A place not of clouds or golden gates, but of familiar things made eternal. You marvel at the care taken to ensure this passage. The amulets placed near the chest, the small carved servants to labor in the afterlife, the canopic jars guarding lungs, liver, stomach, intestines, each topped with the heads of protective gods. Every detail echoes one truth. To die is not to vanish. It is to continue, but only if remembered rightly. Even commoners, when they could, mimicked the elite. Their tombs, smaller but earnest, carried the same prayers. They painted their children, their animals, their gardens, all so they might walk among them again. A shepherd might ask to see his flocks in the field of reeds. A baker might wish to knead flour again in the eternal morning light. To be remembered not for power, but for presence. You pause before a wall where a poem is written in curves and signs. It speaks softly. May you rise like Ra. May your name be spoken by mouths not yet born. May your steps be light in the western land, and your shadow fall gently across eternity. The tomb becomes a storybook, each image a sentence, each offering a verb. The body, carefully wrapped in linen, becomes a script, one that must be read properly for the soul to reach its destination. And so the priests come. They speak spells, wave incense, touch the lips of the corpse with sacred tools, the opening of the mouth ceremony. This act is more than ritual. It is a return. It is saying to the body, you may speak again. You are still part of the story. You think now of the vast underground necropolis's catacombs of kings and queens. Valley of the Kings, where tombs curl into the mountains like veins. Hidden, sealed, yet still luminous. Within them lie golden sarcophagi, celestial ceilings painted with star maps, walls that unfold the story of the sun god Ra as he journeys through the 12 hours of the night. To enter a tomb is not to enter silence, but to walk through cosmic. Time.Osiris waits at the center of it all. He does not judge with thunder or fire. He waits like soil waits for seed, like night waits for dream. He is not a punisher, but a listener, a gatherer. His green skin is not monstrous. It is the color of regeneration, of papyrus, of crops, of earth after flood. To become like Osiris is not to escape death, but to join the rhythm of rebirth. And what of those who are forgotten? You wonder this as you sit beside a small, unadorned grave. No spells, no gold, no painted gods, just stones arranged with care. You listen and even hear there is whisper. Memory lingers not just in wealth, but in love, in the act of burial, in the hands that placed those stones. Even the poor hoped their names would be spoken, that someone, someday, would look upon the Nile and remember. For to be remembered is to remain. The Egyptians knew this. They knew that eternity was not just a place. It was a relationship between the dead, the living, and the ever-returning world. You rise now from the tomb, eyes adjusting to the desert. Light, the world above has changed, but the world below endures. It waits patiently, wrapped in linen and myth, painted in ochre and lapis. The dead do not sleep. They listen, and as you walk away, sand brushing your ankles, the wind stirs behind. You like a voice too old to name. It says, do not fear the dark. It is only the place where the story waits to begin again. The morning sky opens like a painted fan, and you are standing in a city that should not exist. Its walls are young, its streets new, its stones barely settled into the earth, and yet it pulses with belief, more potent than any fortress or temple that came before. This is Ecatatin, the horizon of the Aten, and it is the dream of a man who dares to rewrite the cosmos. He is not like the pharaohs before him. He wears no mask of stone. He is tall, strange, his features stretched like time itself, his limbs long as if pulled by invisible stars. His name is Akhenaten. But before that, he was Amenhotep, the fourth child of kings, son of the sun. Something in him breaks from tradition, or maybe blooms sideways. Where others saw many gods, he sees one. Sun disk, radiant, open-handed, without face or form. The Aten dot, and so he moves the capital. Away from Thebes, away from Ammon's priests and their shadowed temples. He carves a new city from raw land in the center of the desert. He builds quickly, feverishly, as if racing the light itself. Temples without roofs, sanctuaries wide open to the sky. Here, stone does not shelter, it receives. Here, the god is not hidden. The god is light, and light cannot be caged. You walk the streets of Akhetaten, and everything glows. Reliefs show the Aten not as a figure, but as a radiant circle with arms hands extending from each ray, offering Ankhs, the sign of life, to king and queen, always to them. For Akhenaten is not alone. By his side is Nefertiti, whose name means the beautiful one has come. She is more than queen. She is Karula, priestess, mirror. Her eyes are sharp, her chin held high, her presence unmistakable. Together they become the living family of the Atendha, God's children, the God's voice. This is not just religion, it is revolution. The temples of the old gods are shuttered. The statues of Ammon are broken, their names chiseled away. Number, more jackal-headed Anubis, no more falcons, no more Osiris sleeping in the west. In their place, a circle, a sun without face. It is unsettling in its simplicity. You sit in the sun-drenched courtyards of the city, watching a priest offer loaves and incense to the light. There are no dark sanctuaries here, no oracles behind curtains. The ritual is transparent, like the sky. It feels new. It feels naked. It feels fragile, and so it is. Akhenaten's vision is too narrow to contain the fullness of the people's memory. The old gods do not disappear. They hide in hearts, in households, in quiet prayers whispered at dusk. Amen still stirs beneath. The dust, Osiris still waits in tombs. The Nile still carries the names of those who came before. Yet in this brief shining moment, art changes. You see it now, carved into the walls. The king not stiff and timeless, but soft, swaying, playing with his daughters, kissing his queen. The royal family is not idealized, but human-touched by affection, curved by grace. There is intimacy here, a warmth that does not burn but lingers. Even language shifts, hymns to the Aten bloom like poetry across the walls. The most famous one, perhaps written by the king himself, sings of the sun's rising, of the world stirring beneath its touch. You hear it in your mind. When you rise, earth brightens. When you set, darkness falls. All eyes turn to you, O you who bring life with your rays. It is not just worship, it is adoration. Not fear of divine punishment, but awe at the rhythm of light and life. In Akhenaten's world, the god does not demand sacrifice. The god shines equally on all dot, and yet there is unease. The city is too fast, too new, too disconnected from the roots it tries to replace. The priests of Ammon plot in silence. The people nod politely, but keep their hearts elsewhere. The sun may shine, but shadows grow behind it. Then comes silence. Akhenaten dies, perhaps of illness, perhaps of despair. His body is placed in a tomb that feels too bare, too sunlit, too quickly forgotten. The city begins to empty, walls crumble, the Aten fades, and in the darkness that follows, the old gods return quietly, firmly, like the tide. The next pharaoh is a child. His name is Tutankhaten, but it is soon changed to Tutankhamun, living image of Ammon. He restores the temples. He reopens the sanctuaries. The gods are not angry, only patient. And Egypt breathes again in familiar forms. But Akhenaten's dream does not vanish entirely. You feel it still in the warmth on your skin, in the silence between prayers, in the way the light moves across stone. He was not wrong, only early. He reached too far, too fast. He mistook sunlight for permanence. But in doing so, he carved a moment where Egypt dared to see the divine differently. Now, centuries later, you sit where his palace once stood. The wind brushes your cheek. The horizon shimmers. There is no temple here now, no obelisk, only sky. And in that sky, the sun still shines, without judgment, without shape, touching everything with equal grace. And you hear the whisper, even if I am forgotten, I was once a thought made real. I wore the sun, and I left my warmth behind. The first thing you notice is the stillness so deep it hums. You have entered not just a building, but a breath held for 3,000 years. Stone rises all around you, not hurried or loud, but composed like a slow chord played on an instrument made of earth. You step forward, and Egypt rises to meet you through column and shadow. through light that spills like sacred milk across the floor. This is not a place you simply visit. This is a body, a living architecture of spirit. A temple is not walls and roof, it is a rhythm of space and silence. Here, each chamber, each doorway, each beam of light is intentional, aligned with the stars, the seasons, the gods. You do not wander. You proceed deeper and deeper toward the heart of something breathing. You stand now at Karnak, in the ancient city of Thebes. You are in the great hypostyle hall. 134 stone columns rise like a petrified forest, each carved with prayers and records, lotus buds and royal names. They do not shout. They surround you. They embrace you in shade and silence. You look up, and the ceiling is the night sky, painted once in blue and gold, now faded but still whispering. It is hard to tell where the sky ends and stone begins. That, too, is part of the spell. Temples like Karnak are not just places to praise the gods. They are the gods themselves, built into stone. Each room is a layer of the universe. At the entrance, the world of the living. Farther in, the world of spirits. At the center, in the sanctuary, a small, sealed room, dark, silent, pure, where only the high priest or the pharaoh may go. This is where the god lives, not as statue or flame, but as presence. You do not rush there. You pass through gateways like open arms. You cross courts where sun and shadow play. You walk colonnades where hieroglyphs flicker under the moving light. At each stage, the world narrows, quiets, deepens. You are being tuned like a string to the right pitch. Each step is a prayer without words. At Luxor, south of Karnak, the temple is aligned not to the sun, but to the idea of rebirth. It was built for the Opet festival, when statues of the gods were paraded from one temple to the next along the avenue of sphinxes. You imagine it now, the music, the incense, the procession of gold-born deities gliding under starlight as the people sang. The gods were not trapped behind stone. They moved, they visited, they joined the people in their world. In Abu Simbel, farther south still, the temple of Ramses II is carved into a mountain itself. Its facade is 4 colossal statues of the king, seated like gods, unmoved by centuries. Twice a year, sunlight pierces the temple's long corridor and touches the sanctuary, lighting the figures within. Except for Ptah, god of the underworld, who remains always in shadow. The temple is a clock of light, built to mark time, not with numbers, but with presence. These temples are not empty relics. They are scripts, stories written in stone, played out with ritual and flame. You witness the morning ceremonies, where priests wash and dress the god's statue in linen, anoint it with oils, whisper hymns. The god is not made of granite. The god inhabits the stone for a time, the way wind inhabits a sail. The scent of incense lingers, frankincense, myrrh, blue lotus, bells chime softly. You walk slowly past offerings, bread, beer, flowers, the scent of roasted meat rising like thanks. The temple breathes. It does not serve people. It serves balance, delicate harmony between gods and humans, nature and design. Even outside the grand temples, smaller shrines pulse with the same life. On Elephantine Island, shrines to Kumum, the ram-headed god of the Nile source, sit beside sacred wells. At Edfu, the temple of Horus guards stories of cosmic battles in its walls. At Dendora, Hathor's temple holds a zodiac, a star map. Above blue-painted ceilings, proof that even the heavens were invited inside. You pause before a wall and run your hand along the carved glyphs. They are not decorations, they are vibrations made visible. Each one is a name, a power, a wish. To write something here is to make it eternal. Pharaohs knew this. They etched their victories, their lineages, their devotion into the very skin of the temple, not for pride, but for memory. The gods, too, leave messages. You see Isis nursing Horus. You see Thoth, the ibis-headed scribe, recording truth. You see Mat, with her feather, balancing the scales of life. None of them demand fear. They ask for attention, for relationship. Each god is not just an image, but a concept, wisdom, joy, death, rebirth, war, fertility, silence. The temple holds all these truths together in stillness. And still, the world outside the temple changes. Dynasties rise and fall. Foreign powers enter. The Romans, the Greeks. Temples become churches. Walls are repainted, reused, sometimes forgotten. But the stones do not forget. Even when sand buries them, even when winds erase the names, the breath of the temple remains waiting to be felt again. You sit now in a broken court, the sky open above. Birds nest in columns once polished smooth. The carvings are worn, but not gone. You close your eyes, and the temple speaks, not with thunder, but with quiet. It says, I was made to hold light, to slow time, to let silence feel sacred. You open your eyes. The temple is still there, breathing, not as ruin, but as continuity. In the stillness, in the light that filters through columns like fingers through lace. You understand, these temples were not built to impress. They were built to align, to draw the human spirit into harmony with something larger, slower and everlasting. They do not demand belief. They invite presence. They say, come in, let go. Listen, you wake beneath the hush of a veiled moon. The desert breeze, carrying with it the soft rustle of palm leaves, and something quieter still, the memory of women who ruled. Not from behind veils or shadows, but from thrones carved in granite and gold. This is not the history told loudest, but the one that lingers in whispers behind stone doors, in perfume-sweet tombs, and on the painted walls where queens look you calmly in the eye. Egypt, unlike many lands, was a place where a woman could hold power not merely in myth, but in state and temple, in crown and decree. And so you find yourself walking softly behind their footprints pressed deep into the path of kings. First, Hatshepsut. Her name glides like silk, but her legacy lands with stone. Daughter of Thutmose I, wife to Thutmose II, but destined for more than marriage or mourning. When her husband dies and his heir is but a boy, Hatshepsut, as regent alone, but as pharaoh in full, she wears the headdress. She dons the false beard. She takes the crook and flail, the sacred emblems of rule not as costume, but as claim. You stand before her temple at Deir el-Bahari, carved into the cliffs like a hymn. It does not shout. It rises, layer upon layer, colonnades of elegance, painted walls that speak of her voyage to the land of Punt, where incense trees and golden baboons were brought back like offerings to the gods. She is shown making offerings to Ammon, her divine father. She rewrites herself not only into power, but into myth. And yet, when her reign ends, her name is chipped from stone, her images erased. A quiet revenge, likely from the son who followed. But even forgotten, she endures. The temple still bears her breath. The statues, broken, still carry her face. You feel her not as absence, but as resistance to vanishing. Walk now through the halls of Nefertari's tomb, wife of Ramses II. It is one of the most beautifully preserved sanctuaries in all of Egypt. Painted ceilings, like midnight skies, stars in careful constellations. On the walls, Nefertari walks hand in hand with Isis, her figure elegant in white linen, her face gentle and wise. She is not background. She is participant, greeting gods, reciting sacred words, passing into eternity not as queen alone, but as beloved of the gods. And there is time other to Akhenaten, grandmother to Tutankhamun. You see her now on a small carved figure, sharp features, eyes forward, lips pressed in thoughtful command. She was advisor, queen mother, diplomat, foreign dignitaries wrote to her with respect. Even Amenhotep III, her powerful husband, sought her counsel. Her strength was not loud, but anchored. Beneath the surface of every golden dynasty, women wove threads of continuity. In temples, priestesses of Hathor danced and sang to keep the world in balance. In homes, mothers shaped the hearts of kings. In palaces, queens stood beside pharaohs in rituals not as ornament, but as balance, the feminine half of cosmic order. And then there is Nefertiti, her name more whispered than written. Her image, cast in limestone, survived across the centuries in that one delicate bust, neck arched, jaw poised, crown high. You stare into her eyes now, and they stare back in yielding, luminous. She ruled alongside Akhenaten, not beside but with. Some believe she may have ruled Egypt alone under another name. In the time between her husband's death and Tutankhamun's rise, the lines blur. The history is thin, but the presence remains. Nefertiti does not ask to be understood. She asks only to be seen. Even Cleopatra, who comes later, at the edge of Egypt's last breath as an independent kingdom, moves through the world not as a passive figure caught in Roman drama, but as a strategist, a linguist, a leader. She speaks Egyptian in a time when others no longer bother. She positions herself as Isis reborn. She negotiates, she governs, she loves but always. She chooses, and for every queen named in stone, there are others whispered only through fragments. Mernith, perhaps the first woman to rule as pharaoh, Sobonferu, who claimed the throne. In the 12th dynasty, Tausret, whose rule collapsed into chaos, but who held the reins all the same. These women were not simply caretakers, they were decision-makers. You step into a shrine once overseen by a priestess of Hathor. On the walls, dancers raise their arms in worship. Music swirls in the stone, a memory of movement, perfume, tambourine. The goddess of love and joy smiles, flanked by women whose power was sacred, not political, not military, but essential. The divine feminine is not a theme here. It is a principle of the world's balance. Even in death, the queens were prepared for eternity. Their tombs filled with cosmetics, mirrors, beads carved from lapis, jars of scented oil, letters to the gods. They were not buried in silence. They were sent with words, with songs. You imagine the final prayer whispered over each. Body, walk in softness. Your name is light. Your story is carved in stars. You sit quietly beneath the painted ceilings of a chamber once lit by oil lamps. The air is cool, touched by time. You think of how these women ruled not only in life, but in the way they shaped memory. They were not made powerful by men. They were powerful, and the world sometimes struggled to accept it. Yet the land remembers, even when the names are scratched away. Even when the statues fall, Egypt holds the presence of these queens like a mother holds the heartbeat of a daughter in her sleep. You feel them now not as ghosts, but as continuing breath, and as you rise to walk onward, their voices move with you, not sharp commands, not fading echoes, but warm, steady currents in the river of time. They do not ask for your worship, only your witness. We were here, we ruled, and we are not done speaking. You open your eyes to the scent of parchment and dust, a silence so deep it sounds like breath paused on the edge of a word. The air is heavy with memory, not the kind kept in monuments or stone, but the kind etched in lines of ink, wrapped in linen, hidden in jars, and buried beneath sand or ash. This is the chapter of Egypt, not chiseled in walls or spoken in royal prayers. This is the memory that writes itself. You find yourself in a library, but not the kind filled with bookshelves or fluorescent light. This one is ancient, secret, sacred. A papyrus scroll unfurls across a low wooden table, its fibers crackling like reeds in wind. Across its length dance the dark curves of hieratic script flowing brisk, almost musical. This is a story, a record, a spell, a dream, and somehow you already know. Words here are magic. You travel first to the house of life, the temple scriptorium. It is here, in rooms lined with scrolls, that priests and scribes train for years to master the divine language. They do not simply learn to write, they learn to breathe memory into ink. To write the name of a god is to summon presence. To copy a spell is to help the dead walk again. Each mark is a footstep through the afterlife. There are no printing presses, no digital copies. Every scroll is made by hand papyrus stalks, sliced and pressed, then cured in sun, smoothed with stone, kissed by red pens, dipped in black and red. Some texts are wrapped in tombs beside the dead. Others are kept in temples, libraries, palaces. Most will vanish. But some, just enough, survive. You kneel now beside one such scroll, the Book of the Dead, though the Egyptians called it the Book of Coming Forth by Day. It is not a grim text. It is a map for the soul away to rise again with the sun. You read a spell aloud in your mind, and it moves like wind across sand. I have not stolen, I have not lied, I have not killed. My heart is light as the feather of Mat. Let me pass, let me pass. These words do not fade when whispered. They settle into time like seeds. Each scroll, each spell, each chant is not just memory, it is continuity. Travel forward now, across centuries, and arrive in a quiet village on the west bank of the Nile. It is Deir el-Medina, home to the artisans who carved the tombs of the kings. Their hands built eternity for others, but they also kept careful record of their own lives. In astraco flakes of limestone and pottery read their stories. A worker asking for more oil, another warning of a neighbor's theft, a love letter in awkward, beautiful script. These are not myths. These are moments. You hold a shard and feel a pulse. The scribe's hand trembled slightly. His brush flicked too quickly. He scratched out a word and rewrote it gently. He was not writing for kings or gods. He was writing to be remembered. Not far from here, beneath a heap of forgotten scrolls, lies a letter from a boy to his mother. He tells her of his health, the state of the river, the price of wheat. He sends his love. The letter is thousands of years old, but the ink still curves like a hand reaching across time. You read it, and you understand. Writing is not about eternity. It's about connection. Now you drift farther north, to Alexandria, city of marble and wind and learning. Here once stood the great library of Alexandria, built to house every text, every language, every idea. Ships that docked were required to surrender their scrolls, which were copied and stored. The originals were sometimes never returned. The goal was not just preservation, but total memory. You imagine the scholars walking those halls, speaking in Egyptian, Greek, Aramaic, Hebrew, debating stars and rivers, medicine and poetry. Women and men alike studied there, copying works by Homer, by Aristotle, by Imhotep. The shelves grew heavy with thought. Then, one day or many days, the flames came. No one knows for sure how. The fire started. Maybe it was war, maybe it was fear, maybe it was the slow erosion of care. But the library burned, and with it, thousands of years of thought turned to ash. And still, somehow, not all was lost, because memory does not live only in pages. It lives in people, in the scrolls hidden in private homes, in copies carried eastward, in the hearts of those who remembered the sound of the stories. And in 1945, near Nag Hammadi, deep in the desert, a clay jar was found. Inside, a collection of ancient scrolls, long thought lost Gnostic gospels, hidden words of early seekers, preserved not by scholars, but by silence. The desert had cradled what fire tried to erase. And again, in 1924, near Deir el-Bahari, the tomb of a royal architect revealed a cache of papyri filled with poems, court records, hymns, even jokes. Yes, the ancient Egyptians had humor too. One drawing shows a lion playing a board game with a gazelle. You smile, they laughed, they wrote it down. It waited for you. And what of science? The Edwin Smith papyrus, dating back to 1600 BCE, contains surgical instructions. It lists diagnoses and prognoses. It treats the body with logic and care, separating magic from medicine. You see here not just belief, but observation. You realize now that the scrolls did not need to survive altogether. They scattered, like stars from a burst sun, each carrying a part of the story. And now, as you walk through museums and monasteries, through libraries and tombs, you see them the scrolls that time could not burn. They are fragile, browned at the edges, some no longer legible, but the breath inside them lingers. And what is written most often? The names of kings, of scribes, of ordinary people. The Egyptians believed that to write a name was to give it life. A name spoken lives again. A name erased is a death deeper than death. You whisper one now from a scroll in your hands. The ink is faded, but the sound is soft on your lips. Ka, son of merit, builder of tombs, lover of songs. And for a moment, across 4,000 years, Ka lives again. You close the scroll. The wind stirs dust. The desert remains, but so do the words I wrote. Therefore I remain. If you read me, I rise again. You kneel in warm silence, sand slipping between your fingers like whispered time. The desert stretches in every direction, vast, golden, empty. But you know better now. You know that beneath this stillness, beneath the waves of heat and centuries of wind, Egypt waits. Not gone, not forgotten, just sleeping under the dust, like a story buried mid-sentence. For a long time, the ancient world was hidden, its temples swallowed, its tombs lost, its language unreadable. Travelers passed over ruins without knowing what stood beneath. Stones were quarried to build cities, statues were broken, names were erased. But Egypt, even when buried, endured. And one day it began to speak again. You start with a name, Napoleon Bonaparte. In 1798, he marches into Egypt with his armies, seeking empire. But he brings with him something more than soldiers. He brings scholars, historians, linguists, engineers, artists. They see not just desert, but echoes. They measure temples, sketch obelisks, record inscriptions, and in doing so, they ignite a new passion, Egyptology. Among their discoveries, one object gleams above all others, the Rosetta Stone. Found in the town of Rosetta, it is a slab of black basalt, etched with the same text in 3 scripts, hieroglyphic, demotic, and ancient Greek. It is not majestic, it is not beautiful, but it is the key. With it, the ancient language can finally be heard again. You walk beside a quiet young man in Paris. His name is Jean-Francois Champollion, and he has been obsessed with hieroglyphs since childhood. He pores over copies of the Rosetta Stone, comparing signs, guessing at names, chasing patterns. For years he works in silence, long before computers, before electric light. Then, in 1822, the code breaks open. He writes a single word, I've got it. The name he deciphers first is Ramesses, carved on obelisks, painted in tombs, whispered by the Nile. The hieroglyphs, once thought to be symbols of pure mysticism, are now understood to be phonetic and sacred, both art and sound. Egypt begins to speak again, not with thunder, but with syllables dusted from silence. From that moment, the sands grow thinner. Explorers arrive not always with reverence. Some dig with care, others loot. They take what they find back to museums. In London, Paris, Berlin, the balance between discovery and destruction is fragile and often broken. But the knowledge grows, the story returns. You stand now with Flinders Petrie, one of the first to dig, not for treasure, but for meaning. He catalogues every pottery shard, every broken seal, every humble ruin. He does not just seek kings, he seeks people, farmers, laborers, scribal apprentices. In doing so, he reminds the world that Egypt was not just gold and Godsit was human. Farther south, the mighty temples of Abu Simbel are rediscovered. Carved into a mountain, their faces buried in sand, their story nearly lost. Then, in 1813, the top of a colossal statue emerges, ears poking through dunes like the memory of a sleeping titan. Slowly, the facade is cleared. The kings look out. Again across the Nile, unblinking, reborn. Then comes the moment the world cannot forget. 1922. In the Valley of the Kings, British archaeologist Howard Carter peers through a small opening in the rock. "Can you see anything?" asks his patron. "Lord Carnarvon," Carter replies, breathless. "Yes, wonderful things." He has found a tomb of Tutankhamun, untouched. Intact, a chamber glittering with gold, chariots, statues, a boy king resting beneath centuries. The world is stunned. Newspapers print images of the mass gold face, lapis eyes, cobra and vulture. Crowned Egypt stirs in collective memory again, not as myth, but as presence. You feel the hush inside that tomb even now. The walls painted with welcoming gods, the scent of ancient oils still faint in the air. The boy king's name, once nearly forgotten, now immortal, and yet not all returns come from treasure. Some truths lie deeper beneath temples drowned by dams, beneath stones eroded by time. In the 1960s, Egypt faces a crisis. The Aswan High Dam will flood Nubia, burying millennia beneath the Nile. But nations unite, and the temples of Philae, Calabsha, and even Abu Simbel are dismantled, moved block by block to higher ground. A rescue not of conquest, but of cooperation taught today. Egypt speaks in many tongues. Archaeologists continue their careful work. The tombs of previously unknown queens are found. A cache of mummies, undisturbed. A village once lost. DNA whispers secrets. Satellite imagery reveals city outlines beneath the desert. Even the handwriting of individual workers is studied. The story deepens, layer by layer. You stand now in a museum, not just of artifacts, but of returned voices. The statue of a scribe gazes upward, knees folded, papyrus scroll unrolled. His lips do not move, but you hear him. I was here. I wrote what I saw. If you read it, I return, and so many return. A worker in Deir el-Medina, whose graffiti still smiles from a wall. A priestess whose earrings echo her prayers. A boy's sandal, a queen's comb, a farmer's list of debts. The clay, the copper, the cloth all remembering. You walk through modern Egypt, and you see the past not as ruins, but as continuity. Children play beside ancient walls. Cats curl beneath. Fallen columns. Women pass, veiled and laughing, as tourists gaze up at pyramids. Life flows as it always has, not in circles, but in spirals, ever drawing the past forward. And when the desert wind stirs again, brushing your cheeks with dry warmth, it says nothing loud. Only this: I was buried, but I was never lost. You found me because you listened. You rise before dawn and walk toward the river, not just any river, but the river, the one that sings Egypt into being. Before the gods had names, before stone rose into pyramids, the Nile flowed, long, winding, ancient, and calm. It is not just water, it is time made visible. And as you approach its banks, cool mist wrapping your ankles like a shawl, you realize Egypt was not built beside the Nile. It unfolded from it. The land here is a ribbon of green wrapped in gold. To the west and east, the desert sleeps silent, dry, eternal. But along the river's edge, life stirs with softness. Reeds bow, birds call, date palms whisper. Everything bends toward the Nile, like a worshipper leaning toward a god that never speaks, yet always arrives. For thousands of years, the Nile's rhythm shaped everything. It rose in summer, flooded the land, soaked the fields, then receded, leaving behind black silt, thick with promise. It was not destruction, it was renewal. Farmers did not dread the flood, they waited for it, counted on it, danced for it. The flood was a breathing cycle, the inhale of the earth, followed by grain, by birth, by balance. You see it now, painted on the walls of tombs and temples, boats gliding across wide waters, their sails catching time. You see scribes recording the height of the river on Nile, measuring not just water, but fortune. You see priests offering prayers to Hopi, the god of the flood, blue-skinned and round-bellied, bearing lotus and papyrus, smiling gently. He is not feared, he is welcomed. In the villages, life dances to the Nile's music. Inundation marks the year's beginning. Children splash in shallow pools, buffalo bathe, women gather water in clay jars. The calendar itself grows from the river's moods: Akit flooding, Pare growth, Shemu harvest. The Nile is not a backdrop. It is the main character in Egypt's story. Even the dead were buried facing the west toward the setting sun. The desert, the unknown, but the living built homes and temples on the east bank. where the sun rose and crops grew. The river was the line between life and death, not in opposition, but in harmony. You close your eyes and imagine the ancient oars dipping into the current. You hear music's soft flutes, rhythmic clapping, the call of boatman. Along this river moved obelisks, statues, stones for pyramids. Along this river traveled scrolls, prayers, perfume, dreams. The Nile was a highway of gods and goods, where trade met myth and motion became memory. And not only goods flowed, people did too. Nubian traders from the south, Libyan wanderers from the west, Phoenician ships from the sea. The Nile linked Egypt to the world long before maps had borders. It was never isolation, it was invitation. The river welcomed all who respected its pace, but the Nile also held mystery. Its source was hidden deep in the heart of Africa, far beyond the maps of the ancients. Pharaohs sent expeditions, wondering where it began. Was it born of the gods? Did it rise from the underworld? Even today, its origins hold stories of rain in highlands, of tributaries converging. But to Egypt, it never needed to be explained. It only needed to be trusted, and trust, like rivers, can change in modern times. The Nile has been shape-dammed, managed, measured. The great Aswan Dam holds back the annual flood. The rhythm is controlled now. Crops grow year-round. Light shine at night. And yet, something is quieter. The breath is less deep. The ancient calendar no longer fits the river's new pulse. The Nile still flows, but the silence it once carried feels thinner. Still, the river endures. Along its banks, the people live as they always have. Children swim. Fishermen cast nets. Women wash clothes while humming old songs. You watch them and feel something unbroken. The Nile's surface may change, but its heart-tit's memory remains. You sit now beside its edge. A papyrus boat floats by, its shadow slipping across the water like a thought. You dip your fingers in, and the current takes something from you. Not a possession, but a mood. The river draws away your urgency, your noise. It replaces them with rhythm, with return. You think of how many have sat here, queens and scribes, farmers and poets, conquerors and children. All have stared into this same ribbon of light. All have heard its whisper. All have felt, in some quiet place beneath the ribs, that this river remembers them. And you know now why Egypt lasted. Not because of its stones, not because of its kings, but because of this, the river that never rushed, never vanished, always returned. The Nile is Egypt's heartbeat, steady, sacred, and soft. As the sky deepens and stars blink into place, the river grows still. The moon paints a silver path across its surface, and the wind carries one final echo. I do not hurry. I do not forget. I flow, and in me you return. You walk at dawn, when the sky is still soft with stars, and the air hums with ancient breath. Before you rises something impossible, vast and quiet, sharp-edged, yet worn with time. The great Pyramid of Giza, built more than 4,000 years ago, stands not as a ruin, but as a presence. Its shadow is long, but its silence is longer. And yet you know, somehow it is not truly silent. It speaks, not in words, but in weight, in wonder, in stone. You tilt your head and follow its lines, upward 4 sides, aligned nearly perfectly, to the cardinal directions, converging toward a single point that once gleamed with polished white casing stones. Imagine it then, in the days when it caught sunlight like a mirror for the gods. It was not broken, it was brilliant. But its voice begins not in its shimmer. It begins deep beneath your feet, in the quarry pits, where stone was carved by hand. Block after block, you hear the tapping of copper tools, the chants of laborers, the barked rhythms of overseers. These are not faceless slaves, as old legends say. These are skilled workers, stone masons, architects, bakers, water carriers organized with care, fed with bread, meat, and beer, buried with honor. The pyramid was not imposed, it was crafted. You enter the pyramid through its narrow passage. Walls close on either side. Your body must bend. Your breath slows. The air is cool, heavy, unmoving as if time itself cannot quite flow here. You pass through ascending corridors, polished stone chambers, shafts aimed precisely at stars. You feel not fear, but alignment as if your very steps echo a larger, forgotten rhythm. In the grand gallery, the ceiling rises sharply, layered like ribs, like the inside of a giant's chest. You pause here, you listen, and you hear it. A resonance that isn't sound at all, but something deeper. The pyramid remembers the footsteps of priests, the murmurs of rituals, the secrets locked in geometry. This is no tomb in the ordinary sense. No sarcophagus has ever been found in the Great Pyramid's king's chamber. It is built with a precision unmatched by most of today's machines, each stone block placed so tightly you can barely slide a paper between. The angles do not bend. The weight does not crush. The structure is not just strong, it is thought made solid. You wonder at the numbers. 2.3 million blocks, some weighing more than 70 tons, aligned with the stars of Orion's belt, its base nearly a perfect square, its height once nearly 1/10 of its perimeter. The more you stare, the more it reveals not just size, but intention. Someone wanted this monument not merely to last, but to mean. Around you lie the lesser pyramids, though none are truly small. The pyramids of Kaffa and Menkaure, the step pyramid of Djoser at Sekarolda, still layered like the unfolding of architecture itself. You walk between them, through causeways and mortuary temples, past silent statues that still hold a gaze. This place is not a graveyard. It is a cosmic machine built to bridge the living and the dead, the sun and the earth. The ancient Egyptians believed in duality, that the soul was not one thing, but many. The Ka life force, the Ba personality, the Ok immortal spirit. For the soul to endure, the body must remain. The name must be spoken. The ritual must be complete. The pyramid was not built to imprison death. It was built to orchestrate rebirth. You imagine now the ritual's priests purifying with incense, reciting the pyramid texts etched into stone, helping the pharaoh ascend. The pharaoh was not simply buried. He was transformed into a star, into Osiris, into something beyond time. The pyramid was the ladder. Each chamber, each shaft, each passage a rung. Even now, standing at its base, you feel it. The pull upward, the hush of stone thinking across millennia. You do not need to understand every equation, every myth. You need only to listen, and the pyramid speaks not just of kings. It speaks of belief that life matters beyond death, that names can outlive dust, that the stars are not unreachable. The pyramids do not mourn. They affirm. Time has touched them, of course. Wind and sand have worn edges. Looters have entered chambers. The white casing stones are mostly gone, pulled off for later buildings. But the shape remains. The purpose remains, even incomplete. They hold memory without voice. Today, tourists come. Cameras flash. Guides speak in many languages. Children laugh. Camels rest. The city stretches close. And still, the pyramid does not shrink. It welcomes noise as it welcomed silence. It endures, not as a relic, but as a mirror reflecting back the questions we still ask. Who built this? Why? What lasts? What matters? As the sun begins to lower, casting long golden shadows along the desert, you sit in the sand, your back against warm stone. A hawk circles above. Time seems to bend gently. The pyramid glows, not brightly, but steadily, as if it is still witnessing. And you understand, pyramids are not silent. They are not shouting either. They are singing in a frequency, too slow for ears, too vast for a single lifetime. They sing of effort, of precision, of faith. They sing of humanity's yearning to place something solid in the world that says, we were here, we dreamed upward, we believed in forever. You close your eyes, and the stone behind you hums not with words, but with being. You do not feel alone. You feel part of a rhythm older than history, and as you rise and walk back through the fading light, the pyramid watches without watching. It does not follow. It does not need to. It has already given you what it came to say. You return now to the quiet shore of the Nile, not to witness, but to reflect. The sands that once whispered tales of gods and queens now feel softer under your feet, as though they recognize you, as though they remember your steps. The journey has been long, winding through tombs and temples, rising with pyramids, descending into scrolls. But tonight, you don't travel anywhere. Tonight, Egypt rises within you. The sky above is deep indigo, stars blooming like ancient hieroglyphs. Each one a story, each one a soul. You breathe slowly, deeply, and feel how the rhythm of the Nile now lives in your lungs. Not as a memory of place, but as a pattern of presence. You have walked where pharaohs ruled and where scribes pressed ink into eternity. You have listened to stones and scrolls, to wind and silence. And somehow they have all listened back. You begin to see it now not as history, but as heartbeat. Egypt was never simply a place of sand and gold. It was, and still is, an idea, a living metaphor, a long breath between the mortal and the eternal. You carry it with you, not as knowledge alone, but as rhythm, as grace, as reminder. You remember the Queen's Hatshepsut suit, Nefertiti, Cleopatra, who moved not behind kings, but beside gods. You remember how they stood among incense and ritual, not as myth, but as mind. They taught you that power does not always need to raise its voice. Sometimes it stands quietly and simply endures. You remember the scrolls, the fragile papyrus, the dark ink, the scribe's tender hand, how the words lifted across centuries like birds returning in spring. You recall that to write was to preserve the soul, that to speak a name is to awaken it again. You remember the pyramids, those still mountains of meaning, humming with the breath of design and devotion. You touched their stones, and they touched something in you that has no name. Something that rises, something that remembers, and above all, you remember the river the Nile, always returning. It taught you that time does not move like an arrow, but like a current, winding, patient, generous. Egypt was never obsessed with the future or trapped in the past. It moved with the now, and it carried the now forward like a boat toward stars. And so, here, in this final chapter, you do not step away from Egypt. You carry it in your silence, in your questions, in the way you now look at the moon differently, seeing not a cold satellite, but Thoth's eye recording every breath, in the way you listen for the names beneath the noise, in the way you know that even dust can remember. The breath of Egypt is not sand or stone, it is balance. It is mat, truth, harmony, justice. It is in the small rituals, the offering of bread, the turning of a page, the writing of a name. It is in how you walk, how you see, how you understand that the divine is not somewhere else, but here, embedded in the everyday dot. You imagine your own name carved gently in hieroglyphs, not on a wall, but in a whisper. A name held in someone's mouth, a name spoken slowly, like a spell of return. You feel the deep desire the ancients knew, not to be famous, not to be praised, but simply to be remembered with care. And now, as the stars shift gently overhead, you lie back in the warm hush of the sand. You feel the weight of time not as burden, but as blanket. The gods do not hover, they breathe beside you. Isis wraps you in her wings. Osiris watches without judgment. Anubis guards your dreams. In the distance, the Nile moves in sleep. The pyramids rise without speaking, and the air hums with all the names that were, all the names that still are. You close your eyes, and Egypt does not fade. It settles inside you forever, too. End the journey with softness and a sense of quiet continuity. The night has deepened. The sands have stilled. You have walked through palaces and prayers, through flood and festival, through tomb and temple and the long, soft hush of time. The pharaohs sleep, but they do not vanish. Their dreams linger in the stones. Their names breathe in the wind. You carry Egypt now not in facts, but in feeling. In the rhythm of rivers, the warmth of silence, the grace of remembering something older than words. The gods do not ask you to believe, only to listen as you drift towards sleep. Know this: Egypt is not gone. It waits behind your eyelids, in a temple of stars, where the past still speaks in dreams. Sleep well, dreamer of dynasties. The Nile will rise again. The pyramid never forgets.